Good morning, or good afternoon, whenever you're seeing this. My name is Stephen D., short for Stephen Donald Searles, that's my full name, and I'm running for president. Yeah, I'm running for president 2020. It's not a joke. I'm serious. So, why am I doing this? Well, I'm over 35 years old. The Constitution says I can. Am I looking for money? Am I out to scam people? No. You can look. There's no PayPal donation button at the moment. I'm running for president because I want to bring attention to a number of issues and a number of problems with our current political system, which I think are very, very serious. Our society, our country, our world is in crisis. And how far my candidacy goes, I don't know. But at the moment, I want to talk about the things that matter to me and which I think should matter to you, and the things that I advocate, which I believe would be beneficial for the majority of not only Americans, but people around the world. So first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in a white middle-class family. We were not exceedingly wealthy, but we're not poor. I worked my way through college. I had also received money from my parents, received a set sum, but the rest of it I had to work my way through. I have had jobs where I worked as I was a member of a union. Worked as a night janitor, one of those jobs. Worked for jobs in which I was paid less than minimum wage because the state said that they didn't have to pay me minimum wage for those jobs. Whether it was, working for food service and dormitories when I was going to college, or whether it was working as a counselor at group homes. I immediately got out of college. I worked for very little money. I have a past history of drug abuse. Yeah, that's right. I inhaled. I did more than inhale. I had problems with substance abuse. I was fortunate that I overcame those problems. But if I'd been arrested at that time, I would have been put in jail. Probably for a number of years. So I don't believe in our current war on drugs, even though I'm no longer a substance abuser. I worked my way through law school on my own. I didn't receive any money from my parents. At that point, I was working as a cab driver, and I was fortunate in that my grades were good enough that they gave me scholarships. If they hadn't, I probably wouldn't have made it. That was back when law school was still, something that didn't cost you $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. So I was lucky there. I had a career. So, I was a lawyer. That might be considered a strike against me. Let me tell you why it's not. I worked in bankruptcy, some rather large bankruptcies at the time. Dealt with investment bankers from New York. Worked in banking. Dealt with, had a client who was a local bank that was a savings and loan bank. So I was a person who was involved in dealing with getting them out of all their bad loans, dealing with their bad loans that they'd made after the savings loan industry was deregulated. So I have a pretty good understanding how the banking industry works. Dealt with large law firms, corporate law firms, large corporations, done mergers and acquisitions, met a lot of CEOs, most of them pretty psychopathic. I'll be honest with you. It's a good trait to have if you're a CEO. So I have a pretty good understanding of how business works and operates, at least as it did back in the 80s and 90s. I don't think it's gotten any better. No, I think you'd agree with me. I've never been elected to political office. I'm truly an outsider, if that matters to anybody. Some people seem to think that's important. I think it is important to the extent that I'm not hamstrung by lobbyist money at this point, and I'm not going to take lobbyist money if my campaign ever gets to the point where I'm accepting cash donations. So what are the policies and views that I believe in? Well, there are a variety of them. Some of them are you would consider socialists. Some of them you would consider libertarian. Some of them you would consider, capitalist. Yeah, that's right, capitalist. I believe in competition. Right now we don't really have a true free enterprise system. We have a system which is dominated by large multinational corporations, in which there's been consolidation in major industries, in which major corporations control and bribe their way to control of governments across the world, especially in the developed countries, and most especially in the United States of America. We don't have free and fair elections here. So that's one of the things I would advocate for, is getting big money out of politics and election reform, voting on paper ballots, ending voter suppression. We have voter suppression across this country. There's this myth of voter fraud, that there's millions of people who vote illegally. It's not true. You can look up the number of cases that have actually been prosecuted. But we do have election fraud, as has been shown in the last every election since I can remember, probably. But especially last year, in 2016, in which we saw in the Democratic primary Bernie Sanders robbed of his election because of the interference and the outright rigging of the election against him by the Democratic Party elites. So yeah, I'm for election reform. Economic reform. I believe income inequality is killing our country. Literally killing it. We're seeing more and more people fall into poverty. We're seeing, for the first time, mortality rates increase among what used to be populations in which the mortality rate was always increasing. We're seeing outbreaks of drug epidemics in poor communities, white, black, Latino, across the country. We incarcerate the most people in the world, in part because we have this war on drugs. And the main reason we have a number of people who've turned into substance abusers is because the economy has been stagnant or worse for the vast majority of the people in this country. There is no income. There is no, class mobility, income mobility. It's a myth. You look at the statistics. Since 1970, our economy has essentially been stagnant for those making the median income. But for those who make, at the 90th percentile, those who make, incomes that are greater than 90% or more of the people in the United States, there's been steady growth, and even larger growth among the top 1%, and even higher growth among those in the billionaire to billionaire range. And there's a lot we need to do to change that. One of the things I would do is increase taxation on those who benefit the most from our current system. Yeah, that's right. I want to tax the rich. They should be taxed. They're benefiting. They're receiving all the benefits. All this trickle down that we were promised. Have you felt it? I haven't felt it. When I became disabled because of my autoimmune disorder, I have an autoimmune disorder. I'm not going to lie about my medical condition. I don't think this disqualifies me from being president. We've had presidents before who had health issues. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan. But what we've seen is that incomes for majority of people, despite increased, quote, productivity, has increased. Wages have stayed stagnant, and even worse, the number of hours that people are employed is decreased steadily. Benefits, pensions, healthcare benefits have all become either eliminated or degraded to the point where they're essentially not much benefit for a lot of people. Even under the Affordable Care Act, we're seeing a lot of the same issues. We're not seeing help to the people that they were supposed to help. So I'm for single payer health care, because some things the market can't help. Some things the free market shouldn't be involved in. Healthcare is one of them. So I'm for Medicare for all, if you want to call it that, or single payer. And I want the same thing that the people in, lots of the rest of the developed world have. Instances where companies are allowed, insurance are allowed to actually bargain with pharmaceutical companies. Right now, Medicare can't bargain with the pharmaceutical companies, so we have these absurdly high pharmaceutical costs and absurdly high costs for hospitals, which are often understaffed. So that's another thing I'm for. But on the free enterprise area, I'm for breaking up these monopolistic companies, these consolidated industries, especially the big banks. The ones that almost crashed the world economy and created crisis and trauma for millions of Americans. The ones who cheated and lied, who faked signing, on mortgages so they could, foreclose on people's homes. committed fraud and yet none of them went to jail. I mean, I'll flesh this out in the future, but, you know, we definitely need to be trust busters. We need to go back to what, you know, Teddy Roosevelt was fighting for. Making sure that no one company dominates the industry to such an extent that it can jack up prices, jack up fees, commit fraud and get away with it. I mean, just look at the tech industry. Look at Microsoft. I bet you're all thrilled about the advantages of having to deal with Microsoft, right? And what's your alternative? Apple? It costs more. How many people can afford that? So we're actually reducing innovation by having these large companies. It's been proven in countries that are dominated by large multinational companies that innovation declines. So we need more incentives for small companies, and one of the things we can do is break up the big ones. You know, become a truly competitive system again, in which the little guy has as good a chance as, you know, your local Walmart. We need to level the playing field there. That's classic economics. So that's another thing I'm for. Foreign policy. Guess who's responsible for most of the armed conflicts around the world? USA. USA. That's right. In fact, we've permitted our government, our executive branch, to literally, without our knowledge, go into countries and, you know, assassinate people, shoot weapons, kill innocent civilians. We're supporting the Saudi Arabia, one of the most despotic countries in the world, country where the majority of the 9/11 terrorists came from, in helping them in their wars against Yemen and Syria, which is essentially, you know, genocidal sectarian warfare against Muslims that are not fundamentalist Sunnis, primarily Shiites. That's what we're doing. So that's another thing I'd be in favor for. Eliminating, you know, moratorium immediately upon becoming president on any actions that we're undertaking around the world in countries in which we have not declared war under the Constitution. And I would, you know, ask for people coming out of Afghanistan, not continuing to be there. Removing our whatever ground forces we have in Syria. Working with people to find an acceptable solution to the system rather than simply pursuing a regime change around the world. You know, I don't think this is that bad an idea, do you? I'm against trade agreements because they tend to favor large national corporations, again, at the expense of labor, at the expense of the environment. I'm in favor of allowing trade with countries that include environmental protections, that allow, you know, fair labor practices like unions, and that allow fair wages to be paid. But I'm not in favor of continuing free trade with countries where people are, abused, and China literally held in what we would call slavery. Remember the famous Romney little visit he talked about when he went to a Chinese factory where there were people behind, barriers to keep them from getting out, where the suicide rate among the workers was, so large. Our trade agreements haven't done much to help our neighbors to the south. Mexico, NAFTA, they have their own complaints about NAFTA, as well they should. And then I'm also in favor of things that would improve the quality of life for all Americans. No more subsidies for fossil fuel companies, for example. Investment in renewable energy and sustainable practices, whether that's agriculture or reducing harm to the environment. This is the only world we got, folks. And if you haven't been paying attention, just look outside your window. It's February today. It's gonna be probably in the high 40s. I live in Western New York. It's been in the 60s the last couple of days. It's going to be back up in the 60s again. There's no snow on the ground. I moved here in 1988. It's not at all what it was back then. And even then we had a warming climate. Look at the people in California suffering from drought. Or the people in India, the Middle East, Australia, horrific heat waves. The diminishing snowpack in the Arctic, where we have temperatures that are 20 to 30 degrees above normal in winter. Where scientists have literally proposed putting giant wind-powered fans on the ice pack to blow across the ice to try to that's one of the newest ones I saw, to increase the amount of sea ice. And we know nobody's going to pay for that, but that's the extent. We're getting to the extent where people are getting seriously concerned about what can we do, because what's happening in the Arctic is affecting the weather patterns all around the world, in the United States, in Europe, in Asia. By 2030, we anticipate that, or maybe even sooner, I can't recall, it might be, by 2025, it's expected that coastal cities will experience flooding, 3 times a week. We're literally destroying our habitat, our human habitat. So we need to do things. We need a Manhattan-style project to find ways to increase renewable energy. And one of the ways we can fund that is getting rid of the subsidies we pay. That we allow the oil and gas industry, fossil fuel industry to get away with. We need to incentivize utilities to use renewable energy instead of passing laws to make it harder. So those are some of the things I stand for. I'll be laying out more of my policies and platform and what I'd like to see done. Again, why am I running for president? Because I want these policies discussed. I want people to have, to know about things that are out there, that are possibilities. like a guaranteed basic income. I bet most of you have never heard of that. But with increasing, technological replacement of human labor, we're only going to see more and more poor people. Hell, the Pentagon is planning on mega cities in which, we'll see in America the same types of, slums and shanty towns, etc., on the borders of cities like, New York and Chicago that we now see down in Rio or Sao Paulo or other places in Brazil, where the water is so polluted that, there are outbreaks of salmonella, typhus and diphtheria. So, yeah, we need basic guaranteed income. It means everybody gets paid an amount that puts them at or above the poverty level. Guaranteed. Doesn't mean they don't have to work, but if they can't work for whatever reason, because of disability or because they've been laid off or can't find a job, they're guaranteed a certain amount of income. So, like I said, I'll be publishing more videos, trying to lay out a little more detail, a little more specifics of things I propose. But for now, that's what I'm proposing. That's why I'm running. I'm not asking for anybody for any money right now. I don't know where this is going to go, but I am going to ask you, if you see this video, to share it on Twitter, Facebook, on Reddit, wherever, because we need to start talking about and proposing, an agenda that offers people something, that just doesn't scapegoat people and say, well, they're the reason, immigrants are the bad guys, or lazy black African Americans are the bad guys. They're the ones who are causing all the problems in our society. No, that's not the truth. What's causing all the problem is we have a two-party system that is essentially in agreement on one thing: support corporations, large corporations, not small corporations. I'm all for helping small corporations. I want to have policies that make it easier for people to start businesses, to employ people. I don't want to make it harder for them. But we're seeing our two largest parties, which have effectively worked to keep out any competition from addressing these issues, because they are owned people by the large corporations. We saw that in this last election. We're seeing it now in the cabinet appointments that a billionaire, Donald Trump, is making to his cabinet. Donald Trump, the guy who promised to make America great again. He's putting billionaires in charge of things. He's promising to get rid of benefits for people. And what's he offering? What's he offering in exchange? I haven't seen anything he's offered anybody in exchange. What's he proposed that's going to help jobs, that are going to get people in rural areas working again, that are going to stop putting people in jail for minor drug offenses? I haven't seen anything from him. I've seen the opposite. So, that's why I've made this decision. And whether you agree with me or not, I hope you at least consider what I've spoken about today. And like I said, if you find something you like, please spread this video. I'll be putting out more videos in the future expressing plans for dealing with our economic policy, for dealing with racial and religious and other discrimination in our country, for dealing with climate change and our reliance on fossil fuels and moving toward a sustainable economy rather than, one that benefits people rather than corporations. And one that deals with our foreign policy, which is absurd. Just imagine, what this world would have been like if George Bush hadn't decided, based on, quote, faulty intelligence, to invade Iraq. If Hillary Clinton and President Obama hadn't decided to release, the Joint Special Operations Command to help, overturn regimes, to go after kill lists in dozens of countries around the world, and promoted regime change in Libya, creating again a haven for more terrorists, creating conditions which increase the number of people who want to commit terrorist acts, while also increasing the suffering and misery of the people in those communities. So, I thank you for your time. I am serious. Not asking for any money right now. But, like I said, sure would appreciate it if you'd share this as much as you can. Thanks very much. Stephen D. Stephen Donald Searles. That's my full name. Signing off. Take care, everybody.